Okay, let's talk about protests for a second. It's a dicey subject, very emotional. See if we can make it make sense. First of all, haven't we all learned by this point that most of the things that they blast across the mainstream news media on every channel all simultaneously is typically there to distract us from a far more significant event happening somewhere else? Perhaps what's happening here as it relates to what's happening there is getting us to take our attention off of what's happening there and instead focus on what's happening here, which is probably less significant. Next, isn't it interesting that the pro-free speech, just leave us alone, First Amendment folks are quick to turn on that when it applies to the thing that they don't like? Because here's the harsh reality of all this. The same way that the left characterized people in January 4 years ago at that place on that day is the same way that some right-wing people, some conservative people, some free speech advocacy people are classifying the people that are protesting now. If a small percentage or even a percentage of a group that is protesting something specific does something bad or something violent, those people should be held accountable for that. Legally, they should be removed from whatever is the thing. If they're blocking a public space that's impeding on other people's ability to do things, if they're committing actual violence, if they're breaking the law, yeah, those people should be stopped, no matter what they're protesting against. It's very easy that we could all unanimously agree on that. So let's crank back the hands of time for a second to January, that day 4 years ago. The vast majority of people, hundreds upon thousands of people, didn't commit any acts of violence, didn't hurt anybody, didn't break into any buildings, didn't do anything other than stand out there to protest an injustice that they believed was happening on themselves and their constituents, and most importantly, their country. So they went out there peacefully to show solidarity. A small subset of people, a small percentage of people, did violent things, broke the law, broke into buildings, etc., and were handled for it. Yet the left and anybody who opposed it said all of these people are protesting this thing, turning over the results of a selection, which is not why everybody was out there. The people that broke into the buildings, the people that were committing violence, the people that were breaking the law, attacking the police, 99% of people didn't do that. Yet they have been characterized and punished as such and put into a group as everybody was there for this reason and everybody represents the worst of the people that were there on that day. Look, you can be mad at what's going on right now. You could say that what's happening in these protests, these college campuses, it's young, entitled kids, they're being violent, they're breaking into buildings. Yeah, that's probably true, but I would wager that it's probably not most of them. It's probably not all of them. And even if you disagree with what they're fighting about or protesting about, I would imagine for any rational person, it would be hard to deny that there's at least some people there that are there purely out of good nature. A lot of people that participated in the so-called Summer of Love were there protesting what they believed to be injustice, brutality, inequality, and the vast majority of them committed no crime, didn't hurt anybody, didn't rob anybody, and were there out of purely loving or altruistic means, probably the vast majority of them. And a lot of them, let's be reminded, were uninformed or misinformed intentionally, you know? And certainly some paid agitators. But they weren't all a thing. They weren't all a sum of the worst thing. A lot of them were there for, in a lot of ways, the right reasons. The same thing happened in January. And interestingly enough, the same thing is happening now. There are likely paid agitators, allegedly. There's a lot of misinformed and uninformed people. There's a lot of people there that are simply protesting because they don't want violence happening anywhere. But people on the right are falling for it the same way that everybody else fell for the stuff in January and even during the Summer of Love riots. If you're anti-brutality, that doesn't mean you're anti the country that can't be named. If you're anti-brutality and anti-innocent lives being lost, it doesn't mean you're pro that bad organization that everybody is mad at. And rightfully so. We should be mad at them. But somebody being there doesn't mean they're anti a country or pro the group that is against that country. They could just be anti-brutality on innocent people, or whether you want to say they're innocent or not, they could just be anti-brutality in general. So the way that people are characterizing these fellow brothers and sisters of ours, whether you disagree with them or not, is very telling. And how quick they're there to cheer control of the state, controlling speech, is wild to me. You're emotionally entangled in this. It relates to the group of people or the country that you hold dear. So throw all the things that you said about every other free speech advocacy and every other thing out the window. Completely forget about how this will ultimately be eventually used against you in the future. Because you could say the people that were there in January were there to take over the country. They were there to overthrow the results of something. And therefore they should be punished as such. They are the sum of their their worst parts. But they're doing that exact same thing as it relates to this. Throw them out, kick them out, expel them, kick them out of the country. It's like, oh, because look, a lot of people like chickpeas, but just because you're there protesting doesn't mean you're pro-hummus. A lot of people are mad at the actions of a particular region, but that doesn't mean you're anti the region or anti the people in the region. And look, it's difficult to come out and defend this because obviously what some people are doing is bad, but you got to remember, they did the same thing in January on that day in that place. And the way that the right and conservatives and whatever are so quick to dismiss these, in a lot of ways, uninformed kids or kids that just want peace in general by labeling them as such and cheering for them to be physically removed. In a lot of ways, you're advocating against the First Amendment, against the right to peaceably assemble, against free speech. You're advocating for more government intervention, more control, more policing over how you protest. And most importantly, how you speak and the punishment and results that will happen as a result. But this situation is the perfect Trojan horse because there's this very checkered history of oppression and bad things that happen. Therefore, throw it all out the window because now it's against my group. And all of the free speech advocacy, all of the First Amendment advocacy, and all of the future ramifications of how you treat these specific people will come back to haunt you, and it will be against whatever your specific cause is in the future. But because they're so emotionally entangled in the people, the place, the loyalty, the brutality that happened on a specific day and a specific thing, and how bad the sum of the worst people are that are being intentionally made visible to you, that just makes them throw all of their other principles out the window and completely forget how this can and will be used and weaponized against them, specifically you, in the future. So don't be so quick to advocate for these people being treated in some type of way because you're advocating for any person that anybody seems to unanimously disagree with to be treated in that way. If they're breaking the law, then they should be punished, no matter what they're protesting. But if they're not and they're just speaking, or there's a lot of people there that aren't doing that thing, those people should not be lumped in with all the other people. Because no matter how you slice it, history teaches us that all of this is just moving towards a place where we have less speech, less right to assemble, less rights to protest, and more government intervention. And isn't it the perfect Trojan horse for that? Get both sides of the aisle united on this thing. Because if those people were there protesting against some other country or some other people, would it be the same? Would the reaction be the same? Would the advocacy for intervention, control, booting them out, would that all be the same? Would the same emotional ties be in there, intertwined in that way? Would the ability to move the levers of power make movements in Congress, make movements in the halls of power? Would it be as quick, as swift, as powerful? Does any other place or any other people have the same level of protection? I don't know, I'm just asking questions, but you can't even ask the questions. And that should, in and of itself, give you some insight as to how different this specific situation is than any other. And those that are not to be questioned or spoken about are those the one who need to be questioned and spoken about the most. And that doesn't mean that I agree with the worst sum of all these things or that I'm anti one side or the other. I'm just asking questions. I understand what the future holds, and I understand that restricting people's ability to protest and speak is a slippery slope. So it's so interesting watching all the people that stood on all these principles for the last however many years talking about the slippery slope, but then oops, if it happens to the people that they want or the place that they care about, it's all gone. But hey, I'm just asking questions, and this is the thing that's so important about all this, is that touching this topic, speaking on this topic, even asking any questions related to this elicits a significant emotional response of people that are directly related to it. It presumes that you agree with one side or the other unequivocally. It proves that it suggests that you have some type of animus. And everybody just completely separates your position on the free speech argument, the pro-America argument, the pro-future you and me argument. And they're like, oh, are you okay with this? It's like, could we all just get less emotional? I thought facts didn't care about your feelings. Oh, wait, unless it relates to this. I'm just asking questions, and the real heads, the true heads out there understand that it's far bigger than this conflict. It's far bigger than this group of people, this country, this specific thing. Because the agitators, the people the financiers that make money off of both sides of this, they love this. And they love that they've found a cause, they've found the perfect cause to get both sides to unite in less freedom, less speech, less ability to protest, and more government control.